Hello all, here's another elevation data comparison for Magic Roads, and what I'm going to be specifically looking at here is what's the most accurate source of elevation data, and it will give you a bit more background on the elevation maps that I have talked about previously. And also, should you pay for your Strava subscription or should you cancel it? These are the elevation sources: ASTER, Advanced Spaceborne Thermal Emission and Reflection Radiometer, the Shuttle Radar Topography Mission, SRTM, and then we have Ride with GPS, Komoot, Strava, a device with a barometer. We've got Ordnance Survey benchmarks, which I'm not going to touch on, that's a previous video, and we've got light detection and ranging, the gold standard. Now, the Ride with GPS, Komoot and Strava, they get their data from digital elevation models, and those models have been formed from data such as the Shuttle Radar Topography Mission. Now, the digital elevation models have tile sizes, and when we talk about resolution, I'm not going to talk about line pairs per meter or per kilometer or so on. We're going to talk about tile size. So Shuttle Radar Topography Mission is now down to 30 meter tile size. So it has an elevation assigned to a 30 by 30 meter tile. And that may sound incredibly inaccurate. It is, but when you take a large overview, such as if you put this elevation map into a flight simulator and you're several thousand feet up, you're going to see very realistic looking mountains. And if you can combine this with terrain, land class with trees and so on, you're going to see very realistic images. And also, if you plot a ride that's, say, 50 kilometers, and you compress that ride, you compress all of the elevation data onto one graph on your screen over 50 kilometers, you're going to have one screen there. You're not going to see the low resolution. You're not, because it's compressed into such a small screen, you're going to see what looks like a very accurate profile of your elevation across that ride. But as I say, it doesn't mean it is accurate. These are 30 by 30 meter squares. Now, light detection and ranging, that can range from maybe 5 by 5 meter squares, 2 by 2 meter squares, and all the way down to 0.5 by 0.5 meter squares. And the example I'm going to use here is Box Hill, and that's been sampled with 0.5 by 0.5, so 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter squares, and the elevation within those 50 centimeter squares is accurate to a few centimeters. So this really is the gold standard, but unfortunately it doesn't cover much of the world. And the Environment Agency in the UK is responsible for procuring LIDAR data, and they have covered a small portion of the UK. I think they say 60%, but really it doesn't look like that. Now, this is the first part of Box Hill in the QGIS program, a free GIS program. And you can see we have the terrain model here, which has been hill shaded. And I've got the track with 1 meter intervals across here. Before I go any further, I'm just going to skip straight to the results, and then you may understand what I'm about to show you. Of course you'll understand it, but what I mean is it comes across much more clearly. Here is the ASTER data, and so what I've done is I've taken the ASTER elevation base map, and then I've translated the elevation to the points on the track, and you get a result looking like this. It's wildly inaccurate. How do I know it's wildly inaccurate? Because my gold standard is the LIDAR, the red line here. And if we look at the Shuttle Radar Topography Mission in orange, we can see that is a long way from the LIDAR. Komoot is in yellow and Ride with GPS is in blue. And you can see that Komoot has been smoothed a lot more, so it's less precise than the SRTM and Ride with GPS, but I would say it's no more inaccurate. And the most accurate we're finding is the green line from the Garmin Age 820, and obviously that will vary from device to device, rider to rider, and so on, and the Strava, which is the dark blue line, and that's very close to the LIDAR. We've got another line here, which unfortunately is a similar colour to the Aster, and I've just used the GPS visualizer to assign elevation data using best available data. And that's quite variable, but here at Box Hill, it's really done well. And I think Strava does really well on Box Hill because Prudential Ride London, or Ride London, whoever sponsors it now or previously, have had many riders come across this. And what Strava does is it takes these base elevation maps, SRTM, Aster, and so on, and it modifies it with user data. And I think it's done a really good job here. We're going to zoom in a little bit and see, and I've taken away all the others. And all we're left with is the LIDAR data and the Strava data. And this is a little bit of an unfair comparison for Komoot and Strava because the LIDAR data is taken from the Ride with GPS track. I could have been a bit more fair, but I think the results already speak for themselves. Komoot is way off. We can see that, and so is Ride with GPS. And Strava is very close. Now, who knows, I might not have been paying attention to whether the Ride with GPS track actually was on the road, and we might be hitting a bank here, and Strava might well be accurate here, and we might be hitting a ditch by the side of the road here, for example. When I do a video on how to use LIDAR data in your route planning, I will cover making sure that the elevation points come from the road, and I've got a nice example of that on Mount Hood. But here it was just a quick and dirty comparison. It's certainly valid for Ride with GPS versus the LIDAR data, and I think we can forgive the slight differences because we can already see that Strava really is hands down the best here. Now, that's not really a surprise, and this is why it's not a surprise. These are the elevation data, or well, it's a hill shaded representation of the elevation data of Aster over Box Hill, and I really can't tell any of the features of Box Hill here. I think the road comes up here and here. Actually, I can tell. I can just about see the road here. And the reason why this is so inaccurate is because it's 30 by 30 meters squared. And if we come to the next slide, this is the shuttle radar topography mission. And that again is 30 by 30 meters squared. And you can see the road coming up here, but it really isn't very precise elevation data. And these are the kind of data that websites are going to be using, because don't get me wrong, Aster and SRTM are amazing achievements. They are global elevation models covering the entire Earth, and that's a fantastic achievement to have highly accurate data, but it is limited in its resolution. And most sites will use the best available elevation model they can get their hands on, and that's going to be one that is derived from SRTM data, most likely. In the US, there are elevation models that are available that give higher resolution, but usually you're going to be limited to 10 meter by 10 meters tiles, and most people aren't going to, due to the processing and storage requirements, aren't going to integrate LIDAR into their elevation models. And you can see this in the graphs that we've seen. You can see that Ride with GPS, Komoot, their accuracy is very similar to the SRTM data. This is in contrast to those. This is exactly the same area that was covered on those previous two slides, and this is LIDAR data. These are LIDAR data. It's a hill shaded representation, and you can't really, I mean, you can see the road here, but it's not very feature full. So you can actually put instead of a digital terrain model, you can have a digital surface model where they've taken the LIDAR returns and they classify it into ground returns and non-ground returns. And the digital terrain model you saw just earlier, the fairly featureless one was just ground returns, and the other with trees was the digital surface model. Here we are, just a demonstration of the points overlying the digital terrain model, and you really have to be careful that you're on the road. I wasn't careful here, so I just wanted to do a quick thing. If you take the data from the LIDAR, you've got to take it from the digital terrain model, not from this one, because if I took the data from this model here, I'd just be taking the tree overhanging the road here, for example. But you can see the amazing resolution. We can see, I assume, cars parked in a car park here, and maybe sheep, possibly, I don't know, or just other small shrubs. That won't be sheep in there. That's not really a farmer's field, is it? But you can see amazing detail in these 50 by 50 centimetre tiles. Let's just go to our zoomed in data again. And I'm not really sure why I'm showing this, except for the fact that here's the shuttle radar topography mission, and you saw the hill shaded representation of those data, and then you can see that Ride with GPS and Komoot are outside of SRTM in terms of accuracy at this particular point. So the message I'm getting across is that the digital elevation maps of the site that you use to plot your ride do matter if you want an absolutely perfect representation of the ride. Now, Strava will have a digital elevation map that looks very similar to SRTM, except for the fact everywhere everyone rides, the roads will be shown exceptionally well. Outside of the roads, where no one rides, the data will be very poor. But we don't really mind about that. What we're interested in is the ride data. Strava does feed some data, as far as I'm aware, into VeloViewer. So you're going to be getting pretty accurate plot profiles on VeloViewer and Strava. However, every so often where people ride, fewer people ride, where people haven't ridden with devices with barometers, you're going to see elevation errors. And where there's a particularly large error in the base map, that may not yet have been corrected. And another project will be to look at the Sacalobra data, where Strava says it's 717 meters at the top and the road marking says 682 meters at the top. And the LIDAR data are available for that, so I can check that. Anyway, I think in conclusion, I think Strava seems pretty good value if you're going to be plotting magic roads. You can go for, as I've mentioned in many previous videos, you can use a ride and you're going to get pretty accurate data, and you're going to get more noisy data than Strava. It's not going through the smoothing process, and you may get more response to the terrain with a device with a barometer. But you may also get more noise. We can't directly compare Strava and the Garmin Edge here to the LIDAR, because these were markedly different tracks. The Strava route was the route plotted on Strava, and the Garmin GPS route was the GPS that was actually ridden by a bike. And the LIDAR data, again, as I said, we're being slightly unfair to Strava and the Garmin here, because I didn't fully check that each point lay on the road. So we may be just going onto a bank by the side of the road here and further up into a little ditch. But the point is that both Strava and an appropriate ride are both very accurate forms of gaining data. And I think I would avoid Komoot and Ride with GPS, but that isn't to say that I'm dismissing Komoot and Ride with GPS as excellent tools. I think the direction functionality and the route planning in Ride with GPS has been far more polished than Strava for some time. And Komoot I'm not familiar with, but it is very popular. And a brief look at Komoot, I can see that, if you have a subscription to either of these, don't go cancelling it just because elevation data. That's a small part of the website's functionality. And actually, if I were to subscribe to Strava, I'm on the 60-day free trial now, it would be only for the elevation data. But other people have different needs. So I would say if you're plotting loads of magic roads, stick with Strava for the moment. Hope that was helpful. Thank you, everyone.